Mondays with Mike. So in New York, Cuomo didn't win the primary for mayor. Instead, a fellow that I've not heard of before, Mamdani, a Democratic socialist, won the Democratic primary. There's a lot of talk of whether Cuomo is going to run as an independent. Eric Adams is already running as an independent. Who's the Republican going to be? In New York, maybe it doesn't matter. New York City. Is this a bellwether that young voters are ready for big ideas? That they're not just going to say yes to the anointed, if you will, the coronation? Or, given that this is New York, does what happened in liberal cities stay in liberal cities?
It's not a sign of the times and change is on its way. And if you look at there are exceptions in the country of places where this kind of politics has succeeded. Shama Swant in Seattle, Bernie Sanders in Vermont is probably the most known example of an independent senator who has politics that are way to the left of almost any other politician in the country. I'm not so sure that those politics are ever going to extend down to the South and to the more conservative leaning parts of the country, just because there's cultural reasons for it, mainly religious, but I'm not sure that that's ever going to change. We saw that because we saw this kind of movement with Bernie Sanders when he ran in 2016, when he ran in 2020, right? There's obviously a desire for this kind of politics and this kind of change. It's possible that the issue with Sanders may have been his age, that perhaps he wasn't the ideal messenger of the politics, but also because he was fiercely independent. This is a little bit different because Mamdani is so young. I don't know that there's been a mayor of New York that's been quite this young. He's 33. He's not maybe in the distant past, but he's relatively young for politics, which means that there's a long trajectory of if he succeeds, if he wins, of his political career that could move to national politics. It's possible. But for the second question, is this isolated to big liberal city politics, New York City? Yes and no. So New York City is the largest city in the country. It's a very diverse, very eclectic city. Many competing voices. It's got millions of people. It's got its own special taxes just for living in New York. If anything, what New York is, it's a crucible. It's a testing ground of demonstrating that if you can succeed, there's that phrase, if you can do it here, you can do it anywhere in New York. If you can claw your way through the extreme moneyed interests and political power bases and solidify political divisions and constituencies in New York City and rise to the top, if you can do that, then it's a good springboard for national politics. It's a good way to move from city politics, which are very strange and diverse and all over the place because they deal with different stakeholders, to the national stage. It's not so clear that he wants to do that. Maybe he does just want to be the mayor of New York City. You never know, right? Because there's a lot of power. But if he did want to follow the trajectory of Bernie Sanders, that's what Bernie Sanders did. Bernie ran to be the mayor of the largest city in Vermont, and then he used that platform, as it were, to expand his visibility and notoriety. And he ran a bunch of times for congressman and lost, and then he won as to be congressman. Then he used that as a way to further increase his national profile to then run as senator for Vermont. I do think that there is a playbook of this kind of politics that is being followed. The most notable example is in the same city, New York, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, sort of like the presumptive heir of Bernie Sanders' style of politics because they go around the country and do those rallies. And she's raised, if you look at the numbers, she's raised just significant amounts of money, way more than a lot of the other members of Congress. So her political acumen and position is very strong. And if this is the same kind of thing, there is a model for expanding politics of this nature to a national stage. And it's that. It's Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. It didn't work, unfortunately, for Shama Swan in Seattle because she went for city council. But a mayor is a more prominent position, right? It's an executive position. You're like the boss. In the case of New York City, a lot of people, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of employees. And so you get that national stage. But more importantly, New York is the international spotlight because the UN is headquartered in New York. and it's the center of commerce for the United States. It's the financial capital of the U.S., which means that a lot of money flows through New York. A lot of people visit New York. A lot of cultural things of significance happen in New York. Broadway, movie premieres, parties, charities. The list goes on and on. A huge number of people that are famous worldwide make New York their home, and that elevates you in some ways to the national stage. So, do I think that this will help get his particular political views out there? Absolutely, right? Because you're right next to all the major TV stations, all the major magazines, all the major nonprofits. If anybody who's anybody in the United States wants to be in New York, the rents to live in New York are exorbitantly higher than almost anywhere else in the country other than San Francisco, which also has just eye-watering amounts of rent to live anywhere within the city limits of San Francisco. You pay a premium just to be in New York because it's the center of everything. It's like if there was a place to make money in the United States, in the land of opportunity sense, it's New York City. If you can figure out a way to claw a little piece of the pie for yourself in New York City and still live there at the frankly exorbitant rates of rent that they charge, then you can do it anywhere. It's the thing. It's the place. It's a world city. It's and so that's a very. Here's the deal. I'm not so sure he's going to win. He could win the primary, sure, but I'm not so sure that he's going to win the actual election proper. Who knows?
So what you're saying is, although if an individual can make it there, they can make it anywhere, that if a political form for progress can make it there, it is not assured that it can then make it anywhere. But, that there's a playbook, Bernie, AOC.
Oh, okay. Let me be clear. Not just Bernie and AOC. Hillary Clinton was a senator of New York State. Okay, that means New York State is like the testing ground of national politics. If you can do it, if you can win there, if you can hold on to power, Chuck Schumer is the head of the Democratic leadership in the Senate. It has been for quite some time, right? If you can do it in New York State, then you control the reins of power. You get doors open up to you that don't open up for other people. Giuliani is another good example of getting proximity, at least, to power. That it didn't help him very much right now with his huge amount of money he has to pay for that legal judgment against him. But the point I'm making is that it does offer a certain degree of elevation in American politics. If you can do it in the major cities in particular, it really does help cutting your teeth for the national stage. Barack Obama in Illinois, figuring out how to win in Chicago politics, really helped him to become president because he figured out the game. Kamala Harris in California really helped her in national politics because she figured out the game, right? The game is figuring out how to get the donor base and the political support and the backing so that you're considered as a viable candidate for a major party. I don't know that a Democratic Socialist can succeed in the current Democratic Party as the nominee, but it is very clear that they can win elections. Bernie won a bunch of primaries. It's just that the existing power base rallied around Biden because they thought he was the more viable candidate. That Bernie was a little too far to the left. That he wouldn't get enough voters. And they were probably right. That the problem with Bernie as a candidate, I caucused in favor of Bernie in 2016. I saw the writing on the wall for the issue with Clinton, the inconsistency of the message, that it wasn't reaching the voters. But the other issue was also that I don't know, scared, shy of the press. Like she had a real animosity with the press and with the media in general. That she didn't do interviews, she didn't go on TV, she didn't do radio interviews, and Trump was on TV and radio like every day, like every hour of every day almost. Of just like anyone who wanted to talk to him, he'd just sit there and talk to them over and over and over and over and over. Everyone, like anyone, late at night, early in the morning. I don't know if he slept, but the point is like he was all over the place all the time, and Hillary Clinton would like hide in her fortified enclave and had this sort of adverse relationship with the media, which was to her detriment. It didn't help. Bernie,
Well, because with Clinton, they had the vast right-wing conspiracy with President Clinton in the 90s, is what she called it.
The media, yeah.
and that was a liability, right? Because she had 100% name ID, and the issue was that people identified her name negatively. They didn't like her. They didn't like the Clinton name. Bernie, to his credit, I will say, will go anywhere. He went to Liberty University. He goes on like podcasts and radio shows. He'll go and do TV interviews. He'll do these debates, these with right wing congressmen. He'll just go hours and hours. Like Bernie's a political pit fighter. He's the guy who, if you want someone in the ring fighting for your causes and on your behalf, he's the guy. He's the one who shows up and goes to the mat, right, for his constituents. And if Mamdani follows that playbook, AOC is very similar. Like they show up in the political disagreements, in the marketplace of ideas, in the arena, as it were, and they talk, right? They'll argue back. Cory Booker right now is a good example of someone who's similar, where he did his many hours filibuster. That's a good example.
Mhm.
That's the kind of politician shows up. There's frankly, there's two kinds of politicians in America. There's those who, because of their vast access to power and wealth, are able to ease their way into the political elite just because they flood it with money. They can do it because they have so much money. They can make it happen. And then the other side, which is maybe not so much money, but they have the fighting spirit, right? The passion, the flame of energy and resolve and just sheer gumption, right? Of showing up in every avenue, in every forum, on every opportunity to make their case, to make it in a competent, clearly understood, and very vocal way. And probably the biggest contrast that I remember from the 2016 election was that Hillary Clinton didn't give free rallies for political rallies. Bernie Sanders did. Bernie Sanders showed up to Washington and had a huge rally, a huge speech at Dub that was free to anyone. You could just show up and wait in line and get in. And I went and watched that one. It was great. But I didn't get to hear Clinton at all because if I wanted to in person, I had to fork over money, like actual money. And I didn't have any money. I don't have any money. I have to eat and live. And so it's that kind of thing. You've got the politician who's a fervent advocate for those who don't get the same platform. And then there's the ones who walk in the hallways of power and use politics as a means of further entrenching their political and economic interests, tale as old as time, that they use the Senate as a way to further increase their beer empire or their ketchup empire or their...
Wait, were the Bushes behind Bush beer?
No, I don't think so. Or your car lock empire of being vastly wealthy by inventing a better car lock. Anyways, sorry, I'm just talking about various wealthy Congress people.
Wait, car lot? You mean like Carvana? Wait, car lot?
Car locks. Locks for your...
Oh, car locks.
There's a congressperson who is very wealthy because he invented a better car lock.
This I gotta see.
I don't know if he's still a representative, but I think he's a guy from California.
Okay, all right, I'll look that up there.
I can look up his name.
Sure.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's right here on his Wikipedia. Car theft rose in the U.S. during the 1980s, so the demands for security devices. And so he sold a company to a maker of home alarms. Maybe it wasn't a car lock. It was a car alarm. I don't know. He did something for car security.
Wait, he's behind the car alarms? Now, I hate those things. They go off in the middle of the night, and then you're in an apartment complex, and then it's on the other end of the apartment complex, and whose is it? Woo, woo, and then you're awake. Good luck getting back to sleep.
No, I know what you're talking about, but he made just exorbitant amounts of money. He's very wealthy.
Oh, wait, shortly after it, Issa left to start Directed Electronics, Inc., DEI. Oh, he started DEI. He was the guy.
Okay. Yeah, I get it.
Okay. All right. Do you want to talk about Scamdemic?
We can, yeah.
All right, Scamdemic. So this references an NBC Nightly News story from June 25th of 2025. Scamdemic. I'll just read an approximation of the text that they displayed on screen. And I think this is very important. To avoid being taken advantage of, be suspicious of anyone trying to befriend you electronically. The government or police will never call demanding money, and treat every email, call, and text as a scam unless proven otherwise. There was this couple who received an email that they owed money for a phone they didn't buy. The email had a number to call. When they called it, they spoke to a scammer, and she convinced them that she was a federal agent. First of all, very dubious. If somebody calls you and says, I'm a federal agent, prove it. It's like, hang up. I had this company trying to call me this week, and they're like, hello, is this Bud? And I just kept hanging up. And then they call, and then I figured, wait, I'll just give it to my wife. And just say you're not me. And then she picks it up. Hello, is this Bud? And she's like, nope, it's not. And then I hit the end, and then no more calls from them. The end. But, hello, I'm a federal agent. Yeah, that's a red flag. And then on top of that, this federal agent convinces them to buy dozens of gift cards and give them the PIN codes. This is dumb. I can't help but say it. It's dumb. But there's a lesson in there because more and more people fall for this. And
Look, frankly,
yeah.
if anybody ever claims to be a federal agent or working for the federal government, they ask for gift cards. No, because no federal employee or government employee is allowed to receive gifts from people over a certain amount. So no, there's a whole thing, but you can't do it. So frankly, it's just not going to happen. But yeah, sorry for interrupting.
No, that's why it's called Mondays with Mike. And, right, because imagine a federal agent. It's like, oh, I'm sent here because you have IRS debts totaling $68,000. But tell you what, I really have a hankering for Chili's clam chowder. So if you send me a Chili's gift card, I'll let this one slide. No. Okay, so maybe I should feel bad laughing. But whether or not I do, the fact is that this is what the internet has wrought in terms of trust in society. If you have a tight-knit community, you can probably trust most people. You can at least trust the people you know, mostly to do the things that you expect them to do based on their past actions. If you live in a big city, not as much. However, if you and somebody you're doing business with are in the same city, then you're governed by one set of rules, and you can appeal to those rules. This kind of goes back to the fracturing of the district courts. Because if you can all operate under one set of rules, then there's a leveling of the playing field. But when you put everybody online, you got everybody online, including the worst in the world. And what assurance do you have that anything will be trustworthy? If you're on certain websites, I guess they're not gonna, because they don't want trouble, they're not gonna have gratuitously violent things on YouTube, for example. But email, the open web has thrust us into a low-trust society, in my opinion. What should people do?
Oh, trust but verify is a simple one, right? Never, ever, in any circumstance, give money or financial details to something that you don't 100% trust is real. And there's safeguards in place to help prevent that. But there's tools that people use to try and protect themselves, like a virtual proxy network, VPN, or many-factor authentication, that kind of thing. But look, scams aren't new. It's just that the ability to scam, to find, there's a sucker born every day. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah, I heard it from Matilda. Danny DeVito's like, there's a sucker born every minute, and we're going to take them for all they got.
Okay. What the internet has done has increased the available pool of, fish, as it were, to mine for sources, because scams are a numbers game. You call 1,000 people and 999 say no, don't want to talk to you, don't want to do it. But that one person says, yes, I'll give you my entire life savings. You've just made substantially more money than you otherwise would have. And part of the issue here is an issue of enforcement and a sort of laxity on the part of the governments where these scams are happening from, because a lot of these scams happen in foreign countries, and the enforcement mechanisms in place to prevent these criminals from engaging in these fraudulent practices are just not that great. And it's the Wild West because there's no international enforcement mechanism for the internet. You're right. it has created a low trust environment because you have this large interconnected communication vehicle instrument that people use, but an inability on the part of the powers that be, the governments that exist, the sovereignty that exists to actually feasibly enforce some of these laws because their jurisdictions only extend to their borders, right, and out into the ocean a little bit. That ultimately is a failure, I think, of civilized society. That the current way we have instruments for dealing with collective action is limited by sovereignty. The EU actually is probably the best example of a way to address these kinds of things because the EU works a group where they impose certain laws, regulations, requirements on everybody anywhere within the EU that wants to use the internet. And so they actually, more than any other group of countries or entities, have effectively managed to curtail some of the worst practices in the internet, especially in the realm of privacy protections, right? They have a very strict set of privacy requirements for using people's data without their consent on the internet. And they've got very stringent rules on the ability of people to remove their identity from the records of companies, the right to be forgotten effectively, that they have there's very powerful tools and enforcement mechanisms that the EU have to essentially force these companies to play ball or else. I think that's actually going back to that digital services tax thing from Canada. That's the thing that Canada is aiming for too, is that you have a degree of leverage over these companies where you say, look, you either follow our rules and play ball according to how we want you to operate, or you don't get to make money here. Period.
Really quick, the EU thing, is that why you see those things of this site has cookies? Do you accept the cookies? Do you reject the cookies? Is that where that's from, the EU?
Absolutely. And also, at one point in time, I had a blog. It wasn't very popular or good, but one of the things I had to do was make my blog compliant with the requirements for the privacy protections. But it goes, look, the only other exception I can think of actually is copyright law. So have you ever seen DMCA takedowns on YouTube of copyrighted content, music, videos, any kind of copyrighted stuff where it gets removed because the complaint was filed through copyright? That's effective worldwide because there's certain agreements, not worldwide, but in a lot of countries, because there's certain agreements in international trade agreements that copyright law is going to be protected. Part of the issue with things like piracy or things of that nature is that some countries don't have those protections for copyright laws. Some of these people act with impunity and just straight up lifting content that isn't theirs and then sending it out on the internet. But the other issue is actually the open ocean. International enforcement jurisdiction doesn't really exist on the ocean and in space. So technically, have you ever seen The Martian?
Yes. International waters, yes.
Where he's a space pirate because he's stealing essentially U.S. government property to MacGyver his way out of the situation he's in, where he has to hammer together a way out, a solution. Same kind of deal here in the oceans and in space and in the air above a certain amount and underground. Once you go past a certain point of the boundaries of countries, there's no one who's going to show up and save the day for you if you're attacked by pirates or if you're engaged in like internet scheming or fraud or whatever. Like, you're it. You're all alone out there in the open ocean. It's a bird eat bird, fish eat fish world, and there's always a bigger fish. But that provides an opportunity for the malevolent actors of the world to wiggle their way out into the wide open waters of the internet. But I guess the one exception to that would be that to access the internet, you still have to go through the instruments that allow the internet to be. It's a series of tubes. That was a reference to there was a senator from Alaska who said the internet's a series of tubes. He wasn't wrong that the internet is a series of wires. And it's just the way he said it that people laughed at him. But no, there's a cable. There's like a wire between the U.S. and the rest of the world under the ocean, at the bottom of the ocean. It connects the U.S. digitally to the rest of the world through a wired connection. But there's also, and now with Starlink, the ubiquity of Starlink, it's increased the amount of availability of the internet, right? Because Starlink is satellite internet, so it's out in space and it covers vast portions of places that otherwise might not have internet. So that creates an opportunity for lawlessness. But just remember, there's failed states in the world. Somalia is an example, and a few others that they don't exactly have a functioning government. And so bad actors take up shop there and create their own little like organized crime cartels and gangs and warlord kingdoms or whatever. And then they try and figure out ways to comb the internet to make money, to steal identities, to scam people, to do whatever they have to, because it costs. I think part of it is an opportunity cost issue. It costs very little on their end to actually do it, and it's a numbers game, right? Again, it's just straight up a numbers game. You could talk to a million people, and almost all of them will hang up or say no. But if you find that one gullible person who's willing to fork over all their money, you've made all the money you need for the year. And some of these places that we're talking about, where the standard of living and the cost of living is so low, right? Where the average income of the place of the country or place is thousands a year, not tens of thousands, not millions, thousands, or even lower than that, where they are so poor that even if the money is like nominal amounts of money for the Western world, if it's $100, $200, $500, things that, yeah, it sucks to lose it, but it's not the end of the world, right? Like you'll live without it. That's enough money to pay for a year's worth of food in some of these places, or housing, or medical care, like, or a car. So it
So,
provides an opportunity in ways that frankly are did not exist in the past, because to be a pirate, if you look at the history of piracy, for example, it had a lot of opportunity costs involved. You risked being hung from the
yeah,
neck until dead because pirates were killed. They were executed if they're found and captured. You had to take serious risks. You had to learn how to be a sailor. You had to live on a ship for months, if not years at a time, eating really bad meat and bread and oranges. You had to deal with all the other pirates and come up with ways to work together, or you succeed together or die alone, that kind of thing, where like they had to create actual cooperative environments to succeed. There are a whole list of impediments to engage in the kind of scamming and piracy and criminal activity, and all of those barriers have effectively been removed for the internet, because there just isn't as good as an enforcement mechanism in place as there was for hunting down pirates, for example. Because the way they hunted down pirates was they'd get a huge armada, a fleet of ships, and you just hunt down the pirates, right? If anyone attacked a ship, a whole bunch of ships swarmed up and said no and fired cannons at them. And anyone they caught, they hung. They're like, that's the difference. Is that the barrier to entry is very low, and the chance of success, if you succeed even one time, is so great and so extreme that it's a very juicy opportunity for some people. And so, yeah, for the scamdemic, I don't think it's going away because there's a flaw in our current system of sovereignty, that there's no international enforcement mechanism to curtail this kind of criminal activity. And so it's very difficult. It's a very difficult situation to actually stop some of these scammers from engaging in the activities that they're engaging in unless there were extreme measures taken to block their access to the internet. And the problem with that is if you block the access of the internet to them, the tools that exist to do that would also most likely block legitimate commerce. And so you'd plunge some of these countries into the absolute dark ages, that they would become technological, they'd become essentially like North Korea. They'd become isolated from the rest of the world. They become pariahs, as it were, of the world. These sort of like hermit rogue nation states that are just absolutely desperate, sad places to live, because the internet is the future. And if you're on the internet, you have access to opportunity. If you're not on the internet, you're stuck, right? Because the world's moving on. And if you're stuck with a rotary phone and paper mail and walking or riding a bike or something, like, you'll fall behind in our rapidly moving, fast-paced global environment. There are exceptions, right? There's the people who are uncontacted tribes in the world. I think a lot in particular about the North Sentinelese Islands, those islands in the Indian Ocean where people have tried to contact them and they fire arrows at you and say go away. They don't say go away, but they fire arrows, and people then stopped trying to go to the island. The most recent example was that religious missionary tried to convert them and he got killed by the tribe there. It's a protected area, right? That they are immune from being scammed by the internet because the Indian government protects this group of people from having contact with the civilized world. So there are places in the world where there is no internet on purpose,
Mhm.
by design. The uncontacted tribes in the Amazon, the North Sentinelese Islands, some of these other places where they are effectively in a technological, not stone age, but way behind in the technological development scale than everyone else. But I mean, I guess
Yeah.
there's the Luddites, right? There's people who don't use technology. I guess that they're immune.
Yeah. And to me, this is evidence that we live in a connected world and we can't shrink too much into isolationism because, I mean, there's the internet and we're always going to be linked in that way. So we can't have too isolationist a foreign policy. Do you want to move to buy now, pay later?
Sure, yeah, we can do that.
All right. It was reported that buy now, pay later will now be a factor in people's credit scores, or soon. And he said that 41% of people who have done buy now, pay later have been late on one payment. And so I'm thinking, first of all, what's the deal with buy now, pay later? You got small food deliveries sometimes paid in 4 installments. Look, what is going on here? So I can't afford some Taco Bell, so I'll be able to afford it over the course of 2 months. But if I'm paying for everything over the course of 2 months, because it's not very long to stretch the payments over, if I'm paying for everything over the course of 2 months, then I'm just paying for what I did 2 months ago now. So how am I going to pay for what I need now and 2 months ago? Maybe if they're just out of work, but anyway, I tried it once for a new windshield to see just what it was all about. And I guess there was a slight convenience there. It was more of an annoyance that next month, oh, I didn't pay for that whole thing because I got to pay more. But I tried it just to try it. So let's just do a really quick calculation. If 41% that have done buy now pay later have been late, and that's 15% of the U.S. population has done buy now pay later, that would mean 6% of the U.S. population has been late on a payment. So do you think this is going to be the next mortgage bubble?
No, because the amount of money we're talking about isn't as high, and the kind of property we're talking about is more fungible, right? It's not as fixed of an asset. They're not, as far as I know, maybe I'm wrong, but as far as I know, there's not collateralized mortgage security or financial securities and instruments that are making money off the people doing the buy now pay later as like a cohort of people who make money through stocks that where there has the potential for catastrophic system failure like the mortgage crisis did. Because the issue with the mortgage crisis was that they were giving people mortgages with zero down and no credit check. So you were giving people houses who maybe didn't have any money at all. And then it created this huge cascading failure if you look at the what was happening. I don't see that happening here because the amounts of money we're talking about are so small in the grand scheme of things. But I
Mhm.
do think that the tying it to your credit score is going to create a not going to continue to create an underclass of people in American society similar to what they have in China, where it's going to be difficult for them to rent, difficult for them to get any kind of job that involves a credit check, any kind of position of trust or authority over money. And so that just whittles down the pool of opportunity, the availability of opportunity for people who clearly, if they can't afford to pay a buy now, pay later agreement on time without a late payment, clearly need more opportunities for money. Like I don't see the upside of this other than maybe to make it easier to reject someone outright for signing up for a buy now pay later program so they don't lose money. This isn't even new. Payday lending companies have been doing this for a long time. They give you money immediately and then charge really high interest rates between paychecks. And the reason why people do this kind of thing, you ask why people do it, is because they usually get paid on a like a 2 week pay schedule, so you don't get your money immediately. For instance, if I buy a taco today and I know I'm going to get paid in 2 weeks, then that's exactly what's happening. You're paying for that taco with the money you're getting paid that you've already earned. You just haven't gotten it paid to you yet within 2 weeks. That people aren't as liquid their cash as the amount of money they have incoming. And this in particular applies to like the lowest income brackets because it charges more disproportionately more for the lower income brackets because they spend more money. The lower you go in terms of your income with respect to poverty in the United States, the more that you spend your money, almost all of it. It's almost like 100% money movement of the money comes in, the money goes out almost immediately for everything, food, clothing, housing, car payments. And it's very expensive to be poor because have you ever read the Terry Pratchett novels? Do you know who Terry Pratchett is?
No, I missed those. I didn't read those.
Terry Pratchett was a very successful author in the UK. He was one of the top selling fantasy authors. And he wrote a series of books called the City Watch trilogy, where the lead character is a guy named Sam Vimes, who's a captain of the City Watch, the police of the city of Ankh-Morpork, which is a huge city in Discworld that's meant to mirror New York or London or vast urban city environment full of weird fantasy creatures. But anyways, he has a theory in the book that's called the Sam Vimes boot theory. And essentially the theory goes like this. If you buy a cheap pair of boots, eventually the boots will fall apart and you have to buy a new pair of boots.
Yes, that I've heard.
If you buy a well-made pair of boots, you can apply it to tools too. If you apply a well-made pair of boots that's a little bit more expensive, it will fall apart much later, if at all. That it will be so well made that it will never fall apart. You buy it once, you have it for life. And this is very known for certain tool categories that you buy the tool and then they have a warranty for life on the tool. That if it breaks, they'll fix it. That there's certain kinds of things that if you pay enough money, you no longer have to pay more money, right? So in this case, it's the same kind of deal that people want more than they have, or they want what they have, they just don't have what they want now. Does that make sense? That if I know I have $1,000, but I'm not going to get paid that $1,000 until 2 weeks from now, I still feel like I've earned that $2,000. I feel like I want to, eat a burger or eat a taco or eat a sandwich with that money that I have earned, that I've put in the time to earn. I'm going to get the taco. I'm going to eat it. Where it becomes a problem is that people have poor money management skills, that they don't accurately calculate how much money they're going to get, taking into account things like taxes. And so they spend more than they have coming in. And that's where you get the problem is that, or something comes up. This goes back to that boot theory. Your car breaks down, your tire goes flat, your pants rip at the seams. You need to fix them or sew them or send them a tailor. Your shoes fall apart. Your shirt rips in two. Your food goes rotten, gets moldy. You need to buy dog food, cat food. You have to go to the vet if you want a pet, right? And vet bills are very expensive. Your tooth breaks and you need a crown. The list goes on and on of all the random stuff that can happen to someone where if you're poor enough, it becomes a catastrophic, life-changing event. If you're wealthy enough, just another Monday, right? Just another day in the life of having enough money to not care. But if you're poor enough, you have to juggle everything. Your rent goes up 10%, you've calculated enough money or earned enough money to make just enough to live within the means that you have. If any kind of situation, any kind of event, hurricane, tornado, earthquake, fire, someone breaks in, someone breaks your car, breaks your window, someone robs you, the list goes on and on and on of any event, that taco or that burrito becomes at the very bottom of a long list of priorities of things you need to fix, or life becomes really miserable. And what I do know, having existed in a state of precarity, at least for part of my life, where I did not have very much money and I had to live a very frugal lifestyle, is that you learn to value the things that don't cost you anything. The library, going for a walk, looking out at the stars, or going to the park, going to the beach, right? Walking on the sidewalk. Things that don't cost money that are still valuable to do. And this is the really important one, having to develop an iron will to resist the temptation, the allure of anything that costs money, right? Delayed gratification is the term. That the way to make money in life is you just don't spend money. You invest it and make money off the money you've invested long enough that you make more money than you invested. If you live in a precarious situation where life is so stressful and so awful and so you're juggling so many responsibilities, and frankly, life in America is extremely stressful because people pay an exorbitant amount of money compared to the rest of the world for certain things: medicine, medical care, car maintenance. There's a few things that people pay, but they're getting fleeced, frankly, for compared to other parts of the world in ways that are just extravagantly terrible. But anyways, at that level of poverty and wealth, you develop coping mechanisms. And this is where it gets people. Cigarettes, alcohol, drugs, doing something we mentioned before, things like sports gambling or sports betting or gambling in general, or risky behaviors that people take that cost them money and ultimately are expensive in the long run, getting blackout drunk or hangovers or partying too much or going to concerts or frankly spending money in any way as a diversion or for entertainment that doesn't immediately improve your living conditions or situation. It's a constant drain on one's life. And the buy now, pay later provides the opportunity to do that without suffering the consequences immediately. But they will be suffered with the credit score issue for those who are most irresponsible with their money, because it's just going to make everything else more expensive. If you have a lower credit score, it's harder to get a loan for a car. It's harder to get a less expensive apartment. It's harder to get a job. It's harder for any number of things. And that affects your life in dramatic and terrible ways. The only difference is China has that social credit score where if you're found to be so flagrantly untrustworthy or fraudulent, they won't let you ride the bus. They won't let you rent an apartment. They won't let you get a job. You'll just become a pariah in society, tracked forever as that guy that nobody likes and trusts. You'll become alienated, and there's no escape. There's no, I guess you could leave the country, but that's the kind of thing that having a credit score creates, is this sort of absolutist totalitarian situation where unless you are exorbitantly wealthy, you can't live anywhere, with one exception, which is the government. So social services. If you can't afford private health insurance because they won't take you because they don't think you're trustworthy, Medicaid. If you can't afford housing, or a landlord doesn't want to rent to you because they have the option not to rent to people with a low credit score, Section 8, right? Public housing. If no one will hire you because your work history is so weird, or your credit score is so bad, they don't want to put you in a position of responsibility over anything, right? And they don't want to give you a job. Government job, dig ditches and clear the woods of brush and build fire barriers and clean up the national parks of trash and stuff. Get a job that just doesn't require all that much responsibility or interaction with people. When the Republicans make a concerted effort to remove all of those things, that's how you get lots of homeless people and lots of miserable people. It's also how you get an increase in property crime. If you make life so unlivable and so incredibly desperate for so many people, they turn to the path of least resistance. So gangs, shoplifting, mugging, all the crimes that they constantly rail about of, oh, we need cops and law and order. A lot of those crimes could be adequately addressed if we had just an effective social safety net for the people whose lives catastrophically fail for whatever reason. They get sick, they have an accident, something happens that makes it so desperate that they feel their backs are against the wall and they turn to whatever option is available to them. Increase the range of options, and increase those range of options in such a way that they're not crimes, then people won't commit crimes. Make it easier to get jobs, make it easier to live a life of less desperation. But no, heaven forbid that those people get any kind of help or access to help at all. No. Got to make it so miserable so they're motivated. They're motivated to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. But oh wait, we've taken away their boots and their bootstraps in any place that they can, walk.
Yeah. Have you read Ms. Mike?
I've seen the movie and the play, but no, I haven't read the Ms. I should.
My wife and I are reading the book. It's a very long book, but it reminds you, what you're talking about makes me think a lot about Les Mis, and makes me think about...
No, Jean Valjean, he steals a loaf of bread, gets 20 years in prison.
It's making me think more of Marius, but yes, all kinds of topics.
What is that? He steals a loaf of bread and he gets 20 years of hard labor. Like,
I know, right? Although, when did he go to jail in that? But anyway, yeah, steal a loaf of bread, give him a fine. Give him a fine. We don't need to incarcerate him. Just give him a fine.
Yeah, but it wasn't even that wasn't what got him, right? So, loaf of bread got him in prison. That wasn't the full sentence. What got him was the fights in prison. Was getting into fights, and they added to his sentence. That's what got him. That's what sank him.
We'll see you next week here on Mondays with Mike.